How do you prepare for doing difficult things? I'm Andrew, I'm the Flannel Philosopher, and as I've said in some of my previous videos, I am about to endeavor a 1,000-mile motorcycle ride within 24 hours, often known as the Iron Butt Challenge. And I wanted to discuss, how do you prepare for doing difficult things? I think of a number of different ways that I look at preparation for this trip. So one way I think of is preparation is regarding the bike. Is my bike the right bike for this journey? Now, on the Iron Butt Association, there have been all types of bikes and all types of riders that have ridden this. And so I'm not super concerned about that, but I want the bike to be the right one for me. I'm on an R1250 GSA, made by BMW, and I've been riding this bike now for about 2 years, and I have loved it. I put thousands of miles on this bike. So that's part of how I think about preparation. I also think I'm doing 1,000 miles in a day, or we're going to endeavor to do that. Have I done anything similar? Well, I've not done 1,000 miles in a day before, but also I'm not the rider that just does 50 miles every month in the summertime to get ice cream. And I'm not knocking that. Everybody ride their own ride. But I've done several trips of a couple hundred miles a day. I did one that was close to 500 miles in a day. And I did one last fall that got me thinking about this a little bit. I did over 700 miles in a period of about 24 hours. There was an overnight in the middle, but about 24 hours, did about 700 miles. And it was a work trip, so I had several, I think it's 7 or 8 different real estate stops. So there's a lot more busyness with that. Also, that trip included some inclement weather. I think I got rained on about 6 or 7 times. So it wasn't like it was the flawless, perfect trip. It was a challenging trip in many ways. And but that was about 700 miles. Now, I fully expect there to be a big jump between 700 and 1,000, about 300 miles to be exact. I think of that preparation as that, okay, 1,000 miles isn't jumping from 50 or 100 to 1,000. I've done some things that lend me to think, okay, I can be longer on a motorcycle. Now, I'm doing this in the spring 2024. So I say spring, depends on where you're at. I'm in New England, so it's technically, we're still supposed to be winter. It's been a mild winter, so I think it's a little bit more doable. But one of my concerns is, well, I have some time. I've got several states that we still have winter in, and can I endure that level of cold weather riding? And so when I looked at the bike, I had my bike set up a certain way, and what I wanted to do was test the integration between my bike and my gear. And I did a couple short trips with some cold weather riding, and I found that some of my gear, the way it was set up, it was non-functioning. I couldn't use it. I have some heated gear, there's some dials and some knobs you use to adjust it. It was non-functioning. So I've done some prototyping and figured out this does not work. I made some adjustments. I've tested out my gear at certain weather. I've started writing down different weather spreads to know, okay, what's comfortable riding at this degree of weather. So what I'm trying to do is saying, well, if I've got to ride 1,000 miles and maybe like 300 to 400 of it could be in cold weather conditions, can my bike, can my gear, can my setup handle that? So I've been doing some testing on that. I've checked my tires, checked the oil. I'm going to be bringing a battery backup just in case I need to jump my bike for whatever reason somewhere along the line. So I have some of those components that I'm building in, and it's a bike that I know can handle some long distance riding. I service it regularly and maintain it regularly. And so I know I've got the amount of time before my next official service is required, and I've got plenty of time on this trip. Those are kind of how I think about my bike. And my ergonomics of my bike are also important. I've done a couple of adjustments with the handlebars. I've done a couple adjustments with the grips. I have other pieces that I just want to make sure that as much as possible, my body's in a relaxed and comfortable position. That's kind of how I think about the preparation for the bike. Preparation for the body is kind of similar to that, is that, one of the things that I have done and taken seriously is I regularly work out to try to keep my body physically fit and able to handle the stresses of this. One thing I have noticed is that maybe some of my mobility pieces aren't quite as good as I would like. I just had a recent lower back injury, and so I've been trying to actually work on my flexibility, my mobility, to make sure that my body can handle the stress of that 1,000 miles. So I also want to test my cold weather tolerances and temperatures. Like I said, I probably have a couple hundred miles that I might need to be cold on before I get into something nice. I'm planning to start early in the morning, about 3 to 4 o'clock in the morning. And so it's going to be dark and cold. So I did I've already done this year, some cold, like 40-degree night riding, and that felt very comfortable with the gear I had. I wasn't rolling heated gear. I also did a work trip of about 250 miles, and that all of it was below freezing, between about 22 and 31 degrees. And that was about 5 to 6 hours of riding, and all of that was below temperature, and I got to test out my gear once again. So I'm making sure my body's ready for this. I've also started taking cold showers because they say that it helps your body adjust better to temperature. So I'm doing a number of different things to prepare my body to kind of handle the stresses that I expect to face along the way. I want to be as prepared as possible. Another thing I've started doing is actually started writing down a list of gear, so I don't want to be there. I'm not as concerned with weight on a bike. Obviously I don't want to be loaded like a pack mule, but I'm concerned about having the right gear and having it easily accessible, so I'm not wasting a lot of time on the stops. So I've watched some videos, saw how people have recorded that, what that's looked like for them. And so that's what, having the right gear and then having that gear accessible so that it's where I need it to be, so it's quickly utilized and I'm good to go. I also plan to do all the packing, the day before, make sure everything's set up the night before, so that when I get up in the morning, I'm just putting on all the gear and I'm hitting the road. It will be cold weather, so I'll have a bit more gear than I would otherwise do in the summertime, but this seems to be the time that I have. Another plus of doing it this time of year is where I'm going to South Carolina. I lived in South Carolina, and it's a beautiful state, some beautiful people, amazing food. Summer weather is awful. So I am excited to not be doing this in the summer. I'm excited to be doing this a little bit earlier in the year, and so that I can take advantage of some of that decent weather that's down there as I'm heading down south. Those are kind of how some of the ways that I've been thinking about preparation, both my bike and my body and my packing, and kind of mentally gearing up for these pieces. But I'd be curious to know how you think about preparing for difficult things. Is there a process that you always use? What questions do you ask yourself? Do you do a lot of list making? Is it last minute? Do you just kind of wing it and see what happens? I'd love to know what your approach is for planning a trip like this, and I'm excited to kind of let you know if my preparations turn out to be sufficient for the task.